Hello, everyone, and whoever is watching, if there's people watching. So I guess we're the first speaker, so the most awkward bit, because we don't know how this is supposed to work, so we'll just wing it. But yeah, we're Nook, so Alex is here with me. Hello. And we're experts in crowdfunding. We're based here in Manchester. We've helped raise about 85 million within the past few years for startups from all over the world. We've had tons of our clients win deals on Shark Tank, a few on Dragon's Den. So we do know what you guys are going through. We've gone through that with a lot of our clients. But yeah, the Accelerate Me team asked to speak about crowdfunding. So that's what we're going to speak about today. What it is, maybe to get started, a show of hands, who's familiar with crowdfunding in general? 1, 2, not that many. Okay, that's cool. We'll get to it. Yeah, so just a bit about Nook. Obviously, we've won quite a lot of awards, so maybe I dress casually, but that doesn't mean that that we're not a real business. So yeah, let's go straight to crowdfunding. So obviously, this is the definition to get people started and warmed up. It's really about getting funding from general crowd, like it's in the name, isn't it? But there's a few different ways in crowdfunding, how you can crowdfund, and I think that's what we normally see the biggest misconceptions are. People just think crowdfunding is all the same, but there's a lot of different subsections of crowdfunding that it's kind of worthwhile to at least know. We specialize in what is called perk-based crowdfunding. So perk-based crowdfunding is you would say a direct-to-consumer crowdfunding. So it's pre-selling products, pre-selling access to apps and whatnot to the consumers, and then they would sort of pay for you to make those products and for you to make those apps or whatever. Whereas there's a lot of other crowdfundings out there. So we specialize in Kickstarter and Indiegogo, which are the two biggest perk-based crowdfunding platforms. But then obviously, if you're familiar, there's GoFundMe, which is more charity-based, like people asking for money for God knows what. Then there's Seedrs, which is a bit more well-known here in the UK. And that's equity crowdfunding, which means that it's only people who qualify to be equity crowdfunding investors that can actually invest. So you would, as a user, somebody who would invest in your business potentially on Seedrs, or it's the same for WeFunder, the potential investors would need to subscribe and show proof that they earn enough money a year and that they have money to invest in small businesses. And then the platform would verify them as an equity crowdfunding investor, and then they can invest in businesses. And the biggest difference between, let's say, Seedrs and WeFunder, which are equity crowdfunding, and Kickstarter and Indiegogo, which are perk-based crowdfunding platforms, is that on perk crowdfunding, you sell products, whereas on, obviously, equity crowdfunding, you sell shares, but like micro shares to your business, but you're still giving away equity. And they would be much better for products that are app-based, softwares, like SaaS, anything like that. That would be better to go down equity route, because obviously you can't really pre-sell a software. It's very difficult to get people to have buy-in and pay in advance for something that doesn't exist as a software, whereas for products, people get excited in advance. So yeah, it's kind of good to kind of set the tone on what we know, and we know perk-based crowdfunding, so that's what we're going to talk about. But generally, perk-based crowdfunding, the beauty of it is that in reality, it works for the concepts that I'm going to go through work for any product launch. So even if that means that you go down a self-funding route or you launch on a website or whatever, this concept and approach that I'll go through kind of works for anybody, even if you don't go down the platform route per se. Is everybody still with me? Yeah. So do we understand equity crowdfunding versus perk-based crowdfunding? So maybe just to understand a bit more, I've spoken to a few. So how many of you have product-based businesses? So you're selling 1, 2, 3. Oh, okay, 4, 5. That's quite a lot. That's cool. And then is the rest software or service or anything like that? Yeah, cool. So maybe less interesting for service businesses. But like I said, the approach to get successful crowdfunding completed and to raise a lot of money on a perk-based crowdfunding platform is very similar to just launching on your own, on your website or whatever. As well as you can see on the slide, why people go down the crowdfunding route. I think that's important because a lot of people, there's very, very different profiles of users. of companies that go down the crowdfunding route. So obviously back in the day, it was anybody with an idea and they would just put it up, and because there wasn't a lot of projects, they would just succeed. And a lot of people kind of still look at projects from like 2015 and 2016 and they think, ooh, like I have a similar product but better, so I can do 2 million because that company did 2 million way back when. But obviously way back when there was not as much competition, whereas today there's about at least 1,000 projects, if not more, every day that launch on these platforms. And from that perspective, it's really hard to get visibility. It's really hard to just go on and see what happens and expect that people are going to see you, because they won't. So I guess that's where nowadays it's become a bit more difficult to get success, and you need to properly prepare like you would for any sort of business launch. You would need to prepare for that really hardcore and know the platform inside out, and you would have to know sort of your objectives and what you want out of it. But most of our clients, they either do the crowdfunding route as a way to get investment, because it's like a market validation for them. So they would go and run a crowdfunding campaign, and then they would go to investors and say, look, like with not even having a product done, we've already gotten that many people interested, and we've already got that many people to give us their money, basically, without even getting the product and expecting a product in like 6 or 9 months. And that really helps investors to kind of say, oh, okay, there is potential there for this. Then you have obviously creatives that have no other way. So they want to make a film, and they go and they're like, oh, this is the trailer for the film, I want to make it like a full feature one. And then they get people to pre-buy the film or art or what have you. Very popular with board games, and then very popular with hardwares. But I will say that, you know, because I know you're just mostly straight from uni and whatnot, it's very difficult because you're in crowdfunding, you're head to head with people who have shitloads of money. And like we've worked with clients that have gone down the crowdfunding route, but they would already had like Series B. They would have already had like 6-8 million raises done. So they had that money to put into marketing to make even a better crowdfunding campaign. So obviously it's gotten really hard now that there's not just average Joes on the platform, but there's like serious businesses that just use it as a little market test. There's been Bose has ran a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo, like Coca-Cola has ran a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo. So obviously it's become so much difficult. And you know, in its infancy, when crowdfunding was just started to be a thing, to get there. And, you know, here are some of the stats, just to, not to scare you off, but just to kind of understand that it's a serious task. Like if anybody would go down a crowdfunding route, like it's not, you know, I think it's the main takeaway is that it's not easy. It's not just putting up a few pictures, a video, and, you know, expect people are going to sell it. Because 83% of projects that raised over 100,000, you know, they prepared for 4 to 4.5 months, and that's like 4 months of specifically preparing to go down a crowdfunding campaign. So if you want to raise big money via crowdfunding, you will need to prep, and it's like a proper separate its own business plan on its own, really, as well as average businesses that go down a crowdfunding route. On average, they generate at least a 7,000 subscriber list. So again, this is for direct to consumer product. So if you want to get and launch, majority would have generated at least 7,000 subscribers. And that's not subscribers like, oh, you know, I was in a local paper and 600 people subscribed and that's how you build it. But it's people who want this product when it's available. And that's what drives then the excitement. So it's kind of like launching a club, right? Like you don't expect people are gonna be there for the opening night if there's not a queue out, if there's not people on the dance floor, nobody's gonna go on the dance floor. So it's the same kind of thing. You're launching a product, and that really goes for any product, because we launch products on e-commerce as well, not just on crowdfunding platforms. And people just expect that, oh, I'm just gonna make it available and people will come. That's how people think when they think about their business, because they're so passionate about it. But really, you have to think about it that people are not going to care unless other people care, and unless there's a vibe going. Like you need to make sure that there's people queuing up either for a product or for a service to prove a point for other people to be like, ooh, what's this? You know, and so that's the point in crowdfunding. Like people want to see other people joining in, and that goes for equity crowdfunding and perk-based crowdfunding. Other investors, and it's the same actually with investors, because I know you have talks about VC later. investors work the same way. Like if somebody else has put money in, they're going to be like, oh, really? I'm interested. So on a bigger scale with crowdfunding with general public, it's the same. If they see there's already 1,000 people interested, then other people are going to be like, oh, okay, this is super popular. I want to be part of this. And it's the same with investors. Like if you have 2 investors on the board, it's going to be easier to get the third, the fourth, the fifth is that first and second that are difficult to get. And then, yeah, I guess not as exciting, but 70% of crowdfunding campaigns hire external support before launch. And that's because a lot of them, as probably you guys as well, they do everything. And obviously when you get and want to do it properly, it's just impossible for one person to do everything. So obviously, like we've already chatted, you're thinking of, getting help from Fiverr. That's external support, for example. And getting help from somebody who knows about marketing, if you don't know about marketing, or really like learning yourself how to do it. But at some stage, you're going to exhaust all your resources, so you might need help from elsewhere. And I guess this is what you guys would probably by this point already know, but I think it's just important to say that crowdfunding is just as any other business plan. It needs everything. And I think as well, that's a big misconception when people go on Kickstarter and see what's done well, or go on Seedrs or WeFunder and they see, like there's this app and it's done, $10 million. And they're like, I can do this just because it looks easy. But actually it's not. Like it's months of prep, it's months of planning, it's thinking about all your usual business activities that you would think in a regular business plan, what's happening with PR, what's happening with content, what's happening with paid advertising, what's happening with analysis, like how are you tracking things, like where the money's going, like how are you making a profit. It's just the same. And I think a lot of people forget that when they see crowdfunding, they think, this is easy, like I'm just gonna post a project and I'm gonna get people to buy and it's gonna be great. And then it isn't. So in terms of pre-launch, and I think that again goes for a lot of product launches like on crowdfunding, but what makes crowdfunding different is what I said earlier, is that if nobody's interested, nobody's going to join in. So for example, if you launch on Seedrs, WeFunder, Indiegogo, Kickstarter, and there's nobody going for it, there's nobody in the queue, because it's obviously public numbers show exactly how many people are backing the project. It's going to be extremely hard to get people to just join in. Like it's going to be hard to get those first 10 or 20 with having like 3 backers or 4 backers. So pre-launch is a really, really important stage. And again, that goes for any kind of funding that you're trying to get, even if it's investors. Because you need to figure out everything about your product, but then also you have to generate a full audience that's there for you on that day one. So you have to generate that queue in front of your club to that extent, that people are going to be there, they're excited, and they're getting some special offer if they're there on day one, just so that they can be there. You have that foot in the door, and then other people will join them. So you want those passionate people at the beginning. Obviously, I would imagine that you guys have covered these before. So the planning session, you probably know about your businesses. But again, we see a lot of people, even people who've had several series of funding, and they don't have those things covered. They don't know about their timeline. They don't know that it's going to take 4 months. They get in touch and they're like, I want to launch next month. And it's like, but what do you have? Oh, no, but we're launching next month. So it's like really being on point with your timeline, what you want to achieve, and adjusting that timeline to what's achievable, as well as understanding the budgets that you will need, because I feel a lot of people, again, go into it blind. They say, I'm going to launch even if it's 3 months. And then they realize that actually that's not doable. They need to either adjust their goal. So we would get people who say, I need to raise, $500,000, or I need to raise 100K, but I have $2,000. And it's like, well, this is not going to happen. And that's the sad reality. So I think that's maybe a bit, for you guys, because you're so early in your careers, it's a bit disappointing to probably hear that, but it is what it is, sadly. Like, normally have to look at, for marketing, you will need 10-15% of what you want to make. You'll need that in money. That's how it is. And that's why a lot of times it's easier if you get an investor first who understands that, gives you that 10-15%, and then you can achieve that. So if you want to, raise 100K on crowdfunding, for example, whether that's equity or not, you will need to consider that you'll need 10-15 grand minimum to make that happen, because you'll need to get the word out and you'll need to spend it in the best way possible. I think what we see a lot is people spend money in the wrong places because a lot of people get blinded by press, and it's like press is a long game. Like it's not gonna get you sales tomorrow. It's gonna get you sales because people who will come from your social networks are gonna do a background check on you, and then they're gonna find an article and they say, oh, this is a real company. Okay, that's fine. But it's not gonna drive sales comparing to the amount PR, for example, would cost to get somebody to really properly do PR. So I think it's just important to plan and know what you want out of it and be sure that you have what it takes to do it. And if not, figuring out how to get there to have what it takes to do it. But yeah, I think for us, budgets are usually the biggest problem that people have because they expect that with 3,000, especially in Europe and the UK, we see Americans somehow understand that you spend money to make money, but Europeans and British generally don't understand that. Sadly, that's how it is. Like if you're in specifically product startups, you need to make money. You need to put money in. Just a bit of insights. Again, if somebody's specifically interested in Kickstarter or Indiegogo, Kickstarter is a much bigger platform, as you see, like total visits, total average visits per like 6-month period. As you can see, Kickstarter, it's about 48 million, whereas Indiegogo only has about 15 million visitors. So obviously it's a much smaller platform, but it's much more specific. So if anybody's doing any tech gadgets or sort of very consumer electronic-y things, I guess Indiegogo could be a good place to go. But Kickstarter is much bigger because they do cater to a bigger audience. So people in arts, crafts, board games, films, creative, apps, even to some extent, hardware, everything. So that's why they get a bigger audience and they're just a bigger platform. So from that perspective, that's important, as well as understanding for crowdfunding where the countries are. I think that's also a big misconception that we get. We would get like a local restaurant here in Manchester, and there's been a few that were successful, but there's not a lot of people in Manchester, for example, who are on these platforms, active users who give money to companies. So it's really hard to run a local campaign where obviously majority of the users on the platform are from the US, and there's 7% from the UK, which means that a very small percentage would be from a local area. So you would need to be, you could do it, and like I said, there's been a few restaurants in Manchester that have been successful at it, a few in Liverpool that have been successful, but they had to educate their people. They had to have really passionate people behind them and tell them, oh, this is how Kickstarter works. This is why we're on there. Please back us. And you need real ambassadors to do that. But if you want, it is more of a global activity, and that's very similar split for countries if you look at equity crowdfunding campaigns. So if you're looking for seed rounds, on Seeders or WeFunder, and you're giving away equity, you would see that majority of the users would be from the US. So again, that's important to know, because if your product is not for the US market, if it's a UK only thing, then maybe looking at different avenues, or really work on how you will educate people about why you're on a crowdfunding platform, why you want to pre-sell things. And then obviously only go down a crowdfunding route if your product and your audience is a match. Don't go just headstrong because I think it will work. Because if you don't have a global market, and if you don't have an extremely passionate following locally that you could then educate and ask to adopt a new platform for your sake, and then it's very likely not going to work. And then obviously a few things, and those are just bullet points, which again, like I said, go for any product launch, but some things that you will need to consider if you're launching, especially in the modern world online. The two in bold I've kind of mentioned, but if you're in the consumer market, like a subscriber list of people before you launch is going to be gold for you, and that's really important to build, and to ask them about what they think, why they would buy your product, why they're interested in your product. You can get a lot from a subscriber list to kind of adjust your strategy. What we see a lot, and I guess you guys are still young and you've maybe not worked on this project so long that you're delusional about it, but we, on a weekly basis, we speak to at least like 10 different founders from different countries, and the most common mistake is that they are to some extent delusional about their product, and they think this is exactly what people need and this is exactly in what way they will need it, and they don't want to look around to change it. And for example, I have a client in Silicon Valley at the moment, and they're launching a new food and beverage business that's an online business, and they want to sell coffee. But we've put things out to the people, we have subscribers, we've asked them, and all people want to order is boba. And the founder just doesn't want to stop selling coffee. And it's like, but nobody's buying coffee, nobody wants coffee from you, they want boba. And everybody's buying boba, and he sees the sales, in his sales report from the website, that everybody's buying bubble tea and ordering bubble tea, yet he still is launching new ranges of coffee. And it's just really frustrating because he's so into this. He's been thinking about this idea for 4 years, and he's obsessed with it, and he thinks it's coffee and he wants to sell coffee. And no matter how many reports he sees, he will still want to sell coffee. And that's the disappointing side where we're usually at, because we want to push marketing and want to push sales for them and want to help them, and we see it in an objective way. So it's really important to get that lead generation and get people who want your product and ask them about it, and then believe what they say. Believe if they say it's too expensive. If they're saying it, it's probably true. It doesn't mean that, oh, but I know people will pay the price for this product. If they're saying before you launch that, they find that the value is not there, then you probably need to figure out, oh, how can I change my business model so that I can decrease the price to what people will be comfortable with, because otherwise, it's unlikely that you'll sell anything. And then what you probably know as well already, you'll need, images, videos, prototypes, you'll need an email marketing plan, a paid marketing plan, affiliate plan, PR plan, so many things. And that's why I think it's sometimes really overwhelming if you want to do it on your own. So I guess either finding partners, co-founders that have a different set of skills than you do is very, very handy. Splitting it out, like if you want to do it like bootstrapped, and if you are 2 or 3 people in the team, like finding a way for each person to learn about a certain different area and stick to that and really dig deep if you want to do it, because there's so many things that have to run alongside the same thing. And in crowdfunding, it's a limited time that campaign runs. So if you run on seed equity crowdfunding or perk-based crowdfunding, you'll see campaigns last between 30 to 60 days. And you have to do all that within 30, 60 days, every day, nonstop. So it gets very overwhelming. If it's only one person, if you don't have other team members to lean on, or if you don't have people maybe who you're outsourcing to who might, give you a hand or just know how to do it faster. So it's really important to kind of understand that it's a big project, regardless, again, how you launch your product or app, and that you will have to have a lot of things running at the same time. And then obviously once you're ready and once you've made the plan and once you know exactly what's happening every day of that 30, 60-day campaign, if you are doing a crowdfunding campaign, 64% of those who do launch and do everything right, they fail. They don't get the funding that they wanted. And obviously they have different ways around it. So some platforms are all or nothing platforms. So like Kickstarter, for example, or I believe Seeders as well, if you don't hit your funding goal, then you get nothing. So basically people won't get charged unless you hit your funding goal. So that's why I spend so much time now discussing preparation, budgets, how to make sure that you can win within those first few days. Because if you don't win within the first few days, if you imagine just for yourselves, people coming, seeing, oh, there's 10 days left on the campaign and there's still 20 grand missing from that funding goal. People who use these platforms are going to say, oh, this is probably not going to make it, so I'm just going to follow it, but I'm not going to give it money until I see it's fully funded, because then it's just a hassle of getting refunds and whatnot. So unless you get funded in those first few days, it's very unlikely that you will get funded by the end of the campaign. So that's why this sort of pre-launch preparation, knowing exactly who's going to buy, when they're going to buy, having a list of people who are ready to buy on day one and are excited to kind of join you on this mission and be there in the first few days. That's why it's so important, because if you don't get that then it's very unlikely people will feel comfortable to give you their money if there's still so far to go in terms of getting the full funding. But then you have platforms like Indiegogo, again, for product companies. On Indiegogo, you can have like funding that's basically flexible, meaning that if you say, oh, I need to raise 50 grand to make this product, but you end up raising 30K, sorry, they would actually allow you to keep the 30K, they would charge all the people, but you would then be still obliged to deliver the product to them and to deliver the product on time and whatnot. So obviously then it's up to you how you find those extra 20 grand if you need to, if you have a minimum order value or anything like that. But yeah, this is an actual stat of crowdfunding platform. So only about 36% succeed of the ones who launch. So I guess that's also something good to remember, because again, most people look at it and you only see successful campaigns. You know, when you browse these platforms, you don't come across campaigns that were canceled or campaigns that were not funded. You just see everybody's funded, but they're not. So 64% are not. And a lot of people actually go and do it again, because when they fail, they've learned the lesson, they know approximately what they did wrong, and then they do it better the second time around. And we've had a lot of startups where they failed, and then they realized, oh yeah, I should have trusted that survey where clients said it was too expensive. And then 3 months later, they go back, they revisit, they change the business model to support and to try to find a price that matches the value that people are perceiving this product is bringing. Again, not sure if that many of you guys are going to go down the crowdfunding route, but this would still be a checklist if you're launching any product online, not just on crowdfunding platforms. And I guess number 8, eggs in many baskets, is probably what you already know. But I think what a lot of people do wrong is they just put everything on this one channel. So I know you have like a lot of things that you have to think about as a business, but we see a lot of people who maybe have a good connection and they know somebody who has like 10 million followers and nothing comes from it. You know, like we've worked with Rolly, which is a music tech startup here from London, and they launched a musical product on Kickstarter, and their investor is Pharrell. And when they went live, Pharrell not only posted on his socials, but he also got them on the show, which was primetime show on NBC, which is called Songland, which was like a reality show to choose, I think, song producers or whatever. And nothing came from that. You know, luckily they were ready and they had a advertising strategy that was supposed to work. They had a press strategy that brought some money. They had a lot of other avenues because they were well prepared. But we've had clients that said, oh, but we've got this influencer and he's got like 10 million followers and he's going to post when we launch. So we don't need to do press and we don't need to do Facebook ads and we don't need to pay money for like affiliate marketing because we have that influencer. And it's like, yeah, but what if that influencer, you know, doesn't turn out to sell? And a lot of times this early stages when there's actually no product available to ship, when it's pre-selling something or pre-selling an idea for people to invest in stocks, influencers will not work. And it's hard sometimes to explain that to people. And the same with press. People think, oh, but I know somebody who's going to publish on the BBC and I'm going to be on the BBC on the day of launch. It's like, yeah, but this is pre-selling a product. People who will see it on BBC are going to want it now. And if it's not available now, they'll be like, oh, okay, whatever. I don't know what crowdfunding is. I'm off. So it's really important that you know and you're well spread and you have eggs in many baskets so that when something goes wrong, you're not just left with nothing and have to go back to the drawing board. So that's the most important takeaway, really, again, regardless whether it's crowdfunding or not. And yeah, everything is very important. But I will say like preparation and like having contingency plans is probably the best way you can go about it. I think people who are a bit OCD about what can go wrong probably make the best campaigns just because they're really prepared and they know like, okay, if this fails, I have this backup plan and this backup plan and this backup plan. So I think that's the best takeaway. And I think for crowdfunding or anything, like even when you later hear about investors and you know, Shark Tanks and Dragon's Den and whatnot, it's just like not being sad to fail, because as you see, you know, you wouldn't be the only one. Where is it? Where is it? 64%. I passed it, didn't I? Yeah. So yeah, so you wouldn't be the only one. And I think we've seen a lot of people that succeeded the second time around. You know, like we've had people who went to Shark Tank And when the first time I didn't get anything, and when the second time and they got an investment. So I think that's important. And crowdfunding, I think for people, sometimes it's a great way to not risk too much, because obviously it gives you feedback, it gives you this experience of launching but not really launching. So to that extent, it's a bit of a trial phase how your product could be received. Again, if you're in the perk, if you have product, then Kickstarter, for example, is a good place to go. And it would, even if you launch with little money and little things, it would give you some experience in, okay, what did I not do well? What could have I done better? What could have I done differently next time? And go from there. And I think another thing as well, obviously, if you're interested in the crowdfunding platforms, be it equity or Perkbased, you will see that people who have gone before, so other startups that have launched on these platforms, will be super happy, and I mean super happy, to help and talk to you. We've had so many clients that would just reach out to, I don't know, 10 different projects and speak to all those founders, and they would grow for it because all of them have seen how much more difficult it is when you actually do it. That's why they empathize and they're super happy to share. So I think not being afraid to just reach out and be like, oh, you know, like you have something to do with gin, right? Like the guy said earlier, they pointed out. So exactly, like if you, just to showcase, if you decided that, you know, you wanted to launch a crowdfunding campaign, there's plenty of crowdfunding campaigns in that space that launched, and everybody would be so happy to speak to you and share their advice and give you insights just if you reached out. And I think a lot of people forget that. They're just like, oh, okay, I want to be like this campaign, but they never reach out. And I think that's what a lot of people in this kind of environment and this stage where you're at forget, that actually other people who have failed, they will really gladly help because they know how difficult it was. And yeah, just a quick case study for a reference, and I guess that's just not to scare you off, but just for a reference, what a 1 million campaign on a crowdfunding platform like Kickstarter, Indiegogo would look like in terms of numbers. Not to scare you off, but just to kind of get a reality check. What happens and how somebody sells, 1 million in a few months. And these, I guess you'll get these presentations, so I don't need to really go through every number. But yeah, this is just kind of showcasing, how we would have identified the markets first. So we knew that USA was their biggest market, and then it was UK, Australia, mainland Europe, and then tier 3 countries were Asia. And that's how we split like marketing spend that was available to the team. And then obviously we had a timeline of 3 months where we were just doing pre-launch, grew the online community, asked the online community, what do you think about it? What the product should look like? Do you like this design? Do you like that design? Is this price good? Would you like this kind of discount to be one of our first like adopters, etc., etc. And grew that list with the budget that is shown there. And then Kickstarter launched, and it took like a month and a half, and the goal was to raise minimum 50,000, and the budget for that was actually 20,000, which was so quite a lot percentage of what they wanted to spend. So again, just the reality check how much some businesses actually invest in it. And then Indiegogo afterwards, they wanted to raise another 60,000, and then in the end, we generated about 4,000 leads, subscribers who wanted this product on day one. And that's the important list, like people who just wanted it and wanted to be the first there and were happy with a little tit for tat. So they would have been promised, okay, you'll get 20% off on day one if you're there on day one, just so that they get some little extra benefit in order to generate that queue in front of the club for other people to get excited about it, as well as the community on Facebook was really engaged. And this is how a traditional Kickstarter campaign then looks like in terms of sales per month. So they launched, and you can see, how important that those first few days are. Everything later is really like a long tail. It's a long tail of sales within those 45 or 40 days. And everything happens in the first few days and the last few days, because in the last few days there's urgency because the campaign is ending. You're not going to be able to get this at this price anymore because this is just an introductory pre-order price. And obviously in the first day, that's the result of all the pre-launch building and generating a subscriber list and generating people who just want it, like a product, like a sneaker drop really. and they want to be there on day one because they're getting the best deal there is, and they're the first adopters, and they feel great that they're one of the first people there. And then the real numbers in the end, and again, you can then dissect that, whoever is into numbers and planning, later when you get the presentation. But yeah, this is how it actually split in terms of revenue, goals, revenues achieved, goals per achieved, return on ad spend, overall revenue. And as you can see in the end they had to spend 89,000 in order to, sell $1 million worth of speaker, which is a bit less. It's like about 8% of what we earlier discussed, but that was still like in 2018, I believe, and it's become a bit more difficult now. Advertising is more expensive, so you would expect that 10-15% would be much more realistic. But yeah, hopefully this will help to kind of generate a bit for the ones who might think crowdfunding is the way to go. This might help with just some number parts. So much talking. Cool. That's it. Yeah.
What are like some horror stories that you've seen of products that really shouldn't have gone to the crowdfunding route?
Well, it's either a bad product market fit for the crowdfunding. So, for example, do you know top of mind? I'm thinking like app, like a iOS. I remember one that was a iOS app that was to educate, and they were offering that people will get like a 3-month subscription to the app for like 30% off, and nobody really cared. It's not a good deal. People are used to trying apps and then deciding whether they buy. So I guess that was a really poor fit. And then I guess there was a standing desk that we work with from the US. And they expected that, with $5,000 that they're gonna sell 500 of this high-tech, $1,000 worth standing desks. And they would not listen to reason, nor to data, nor to numbers, and they really failed once they went live. How do you remember? It's hard because obviously we actually end up working only with the ones who prep and seem reasonable, like we would always do an intro call, and if it seems delusional on the intro call, we would just kind of say no. So I think we wouldn't have had as much experience with failed projects. I think it's like failed little bits here and there. So like not trusting the data, not trusting what customers are saying is the most common thing. And like overpricing the product, like thinking that the product people will be okay to pay a premium just because you've used like this vegan leather on a plug-in charger, And they're like, this is going to be $200 because this is super beautiful designed portable charger. And it's like, yeah, but, nobody's going to pay for it. So obviously we try in those situations to help and like to do analysis and to get surveys out for founders to then see the data and hopefully trust it, but some still don't. Yeah. So I think those would be the most common mistakes.
So the biggest mistake you would say is thinking it's just going to all happen organically.
Yeah.
Putting it on Kickstarter and calling it a day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not preparing and not having like a community already ready to back you. I think that's the only way how, like, for example, the local restaurants here in Manchester were able to do it. And there's not a chain, but a restaurateur that I think launched maybe 3 restaurants here in Manchester, like are with Kickstarter, which is really good. But they worked on their community. They had a community ready. It's not like they put on Kickstarter and then that's how they raised money. They had those people in their pocket before they went live. And then because of it, there were other people who then like chimed in because they saw, this is a really cool campaign, and you don't get eyeballs because in the end, these are marketplaces and, they work on algorithms. And if something's not doing well and if something's not getting organic traction, which platform things organic traction, but it's really you driving the traffic, then they're not going to show it to other people. It's not going to rank high. It's not going to show in popular, and thus nobody's going to see it. And that's sometimes sad because, you would want for some projects to be seen and they just, couldn't make it work or couldn't make it happen. So, and sometimes you actually have people with shitloads of money. Like I currently have worked with the client who has, again, like VC funding, for days. And people just are not into it. people are just not into it. It's like a sleep product, like some brain stimulation. It's like a headband that you do it's called a stim session, which is like a little microcurrent stimulation of your brain. And they thought, everybody's going to use this because you only do a 15-minute session before sleep, and that sort of, with the right frequencies, triggers your brain that it gets into sleep mode, and then you fall asleep better and sleep better and whatnot. And it seemed like, people would like this. A lot of people struggle with sleep, but it's been 5 months of testing and trying and feedbacking, and nobody wants it. And it's so sad because they're doing everything right. They have a great product. They have prototypes. They have, a good team behind it. They have MIT scientists, and like the team is amazing. It's just the product is sometimes just there's nobody who wants it. Yeah, it's just nobody wants it. Or they sort of kind of skew a bit more like 55 plus. And those are not really people who will pre-order and, they'll buy it on what's it called? Like the TV sales, like the QVC. They'll buy it on QVC, when they see it, it's helped me sleep better. And then they're like, I'll buy it. So yeah, like product market fit test is big. And I think that's sometimes the sad part when you work so long on a product. And I think that's difficult for this particular client. They have all the money you would need to start a business. They could put it into advertising, but nobody wants it. And I think that's sad because there's not really much that they can do. It's kind of feels like it's out of their control unless they pivot and figure out how to pivot. But yeah, when you set your mind, I'm launching in 2022 and I'm launching in March, and then March comes and nobody wants it, you're like, okay, so what do I do now? You kind of go back. And I think that's also good to understand that it's not only success stories out there, and even people in Silicon Valley who have VC funding, and like this guy who's running this project is the guy who created like Bose as the company, So you have people with tremendous experience, money, everything, and they also sometimes just can't make a project work, and I think that's fine. And I think that's sometimes not publicized enough for people to be okay and then just pivot and do something different and not feel like a complete failure. So yeah. Any other questions?
I wanted to ask, so you probably have seen a lot of founders the last years and different kinds of personalities, I guess. Is there a certain, when you look at certain founders and their personalities and then the probability of the startup to fail or not to fail, or at least to pivot, are there certain similarities you have? I don't know. Because I've realized there are like certain different types of like people with egos, and you can just tell like there's this guy I know from Germany, and he did like this big LinkedIn post like, I don't know, 2 years ago. Guys, at the age of 21, I founded my company. He didn't have a product, nothing. He just went to this like, to register his company. And he still doesn't have a product, but he's hyping himself up in a way on his socials, and he doesn't have anything 2 years later. But somehow he got investment. He doesn't even have, he has nothing. And I'm like, and he's like doing all these big, I have this investor, he wants to, give me 80,000. I'm like, bitch, you have shit. What the fuck are you talking about? And I'm like, but he's somehow able to get like certain people to actually believe in him.
Because
and not a lot is happening. So what kind of people do have like this big vision and then doesn't work? And what can we learn as founders to be a bit more humble, to have certain character traits which make us just more successful and more able to take criticism and also change our idea if we need to.
Yeah, I think it's a great question actually, and it's funny because I don't know if anybody has Apple TV and watches it, but the We Crashed, the We Work, is now a series on Apple TV, and I really recommend it even if you illegally download it if you don't have Apple TV. But it's so good, it's really good. And it's about that, if you get investment, that doesn't mean you have a good business, that just means you got investment and, you can potentially spend that money wherever you'll spend it, but that doesn't make a business. And I think some investors invest in founders and some invest in businesses. And like, that's what you'll see if you watch Shark Tank, they'll always be very and they're going to want to see numbers and they're going to want to see profits and whatnot, which makes sense. That's like, I'm investing in a business. Whereas, if some people just get excited about a founder who's a bit, delusional, and that's fine as well, but that doesn't mean that he's going to ever build something that is a sustainable business and a sustainable, life for yourself is just something that now is kind of this trend. Oh, I got investment, and because of that, like I'm successful. It's not really the case. It's just, yeah, somebody gave you a chance. But again, I think when you have the VC talk, if anybody who's from that environment, 90% fail, not 64. 90 of those who get investments fail. So from that perspective, that doesn't mean anything. But in terms of founders' traits, it's hard to say because obviously we have preferred traits that obviously they do turn out well. And it's people who I think are self-aware. I think self-awareness is the one that's very common. So people who are self-aware and know what they know and know what they don't know, and then are happy to listen to whomever they want guidance from, whether that's, somebody who's a developer and has no clue about marketing and hires a marketing consultant, and then they listen to that marketing consultant, because we get people who hire us, they pay us good money, and then they tell us what to do. They don't ask us what they should do. And I think that's very frustrating sometimes, because you feel like, oh, but you could be, using our expertise, yet they want to tell us what to say, how to say it, when to say it. And it's like, why did you pay us? You clearly think you know best. So I think knowing what you know and knowing what you have knowledge about, and then accepting help from whether you ask for it or not, where you don't know, I think that's a great trait to have, I would say. And those are people who usually are successful because they're humble, they speak to people. I think as well, people who don't think things just happen, it's a lot of hard work. And I think people don't see that, especially on crowdfunding campaigns where it's just million here, million there, million there. They think, oh, you put it up and you have success and that's it. But the ones who are really successful are the ones who speak to customers every day themselves. They're like 12, 14 hours and they're chatting to people, they're replying to emails because they want to learn what people are saying. They don't hire somebody to, oh, I don't do customer support because I'm the founder, like somebody else is doing it and I don't care what they're doing. Like if you're the founder, like customer support is the best place to be, because you hear what people are saying, what they don't like, even like Facebook comments. Like we in pre-launch stages, that's where you learn so much, because the product's not out there yet and people are going to comment and have discussions. And if you're the founder, but you're, posting on your social media how successful you are and the investments you've got, but you don't listen to what people are talking about your product at that early stage, obviously later, but at that early stage, you're just missing out because there's so much intel you can get from just spending time. So I think it's time and self-awareness, I will say. Cool.
Share platform special one to drink. So now like Seeds and Proud you do them on I think they've merged, have they? But they've still got the independence.
Yeah. What do you mean independence?
As in you can fund on Seeds, you can fund on Proud you.
Yeah.
With the one and the same now, aren't they?
Yeah. So I mean, for drinks, you can go anyway. It's just a question of what you want, because obviously equity crowdfunding versus Perkbased is very different. So if you wanted to pre-sell, you could pre-sell on Perkbased. It's just very difficult probably because you struggle with marketing alcoholic beverages. But if you want to give away equity, then Cedars is a good place to be. And there's been tons of very successful food and beverage companies that have done really great, because I think it's an attractive place to be. And for like micro investors, those who put in like 500 quid, it's not as difficult as it would be, I think, on a Perk-based crowdfunding. So if it was me knowing what I know, I would definitely go on equity crowdfunding. But then you have completely different challenges to what we've discussed, because obviously you need somebody who really knows how to run equity crowdfunding so that it's all sorted, that financials are sorted, that it's all, tip top. Because it's much more risky, I feel.
So it's not really a question, it's just about the anti-boba guy. What about like a coffee with creamy bobas in? That could be a nice, I would love that. Maybe like some bourbon bobas.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll pass it on. Maybe. I think, there's a reason why he doesn't, by the way, want bobas. Why he wants to sell coffee, it's because margins. He's just driven by the spreadsheet he's looking at and he sees coffee 70% margin, boba, he's got a 20% margin. It's really hard to scale. So obviously he's hoping people come for the boba, but stay for the coffee. I don't know if they will, but yeah, it's a good idea.
It's a or pivoting how you price the product?
Yeah, we've done it through testing most of the past few years with every product. If it's an actual physical product, so you have the way that I would do it, and we do it for a lot of our clients. We have landing pages set up which have different price points, and we just test conversion rates on people doing a certain action that you want, whether that's subscribe or buy at a certain price point, and then obviously giving it enough time to have a statistically relevant data sample, and then deciding based on the data it's the best way to go, obviously, and they should all go to the same customer, but that's how we would do it. And then the other way around it, which is a bit less trustworthy, there's a few price testing strategies that are theoretical out there that kind of work with surveys. So you would obviously give people a survey to answer about the product, and then the last questions that you would ask would be, how do you feel about the value for money at this price point, rather than asking them what you're willing to pay or what, which price do you find better. People are always going to go for the lowest price. So you would ask about value for money and ask them to rate it from like above average to below average. And that gives you a good understanding whether people think this is just average value for money, that price point, so it could be better. Or if they think, oh, this is actually above average value for money, that gives you a good feedback without asking what they are willing to pay to understand if you're on track or not. But yeah, usually testing is the best way to go.
Why is it slightly less trustworthy?
No, I'm not saying less trustworthy. What do you mean less trustworthy?
Oh, you were saying it's less of a good way.
No, not less of a good way. It's just obviously you're asking people, so you're just trusting that they're in a mindset that they're answering properly rather than just, ticking a survey. Whereas obviously if you put it in front of them at different price points and then see how people convert through or buy through, then you get real data for real price points. So that's just a bit more, realistic.
Great, thanks.
Cool, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.